Hi, my name is William Schaeffer. We have another book review today. Breaking Down the Wall of Silence by Alice Miller. This is the most difficult book I have ever read in my life. Tragic and true and a must-read for every thinking and thoughtful person. It's difficult to do justice to this book or to treat a subject as serious as this, child abuse, child trauma, the effect of child trauma on society, in a short video. However, I was in my 50s before I even knew this book existed. Therefore, it's important for me to review the book and suggest that you read it. The thesis of this book is that there is an unspoken code of silence about the physical trauma that most all children endure in modern Western society. This includes abuse, neglect, and hitting. 80% of mothers hit their children in Western societies. Alice Miller makes the point that this behavior of primarily mothers towards their children later becomes the primary statistical cause of our social problems and our medical problems. There's a statistical link between violent crime, sex crime, economic crime, and childhood abuse. There's a statistical link between adult diseases of cancer, other degenerative diseases, and childhood abuse. There is a statistical link between mental illness as an adult and child abuse, traumatic experience of the child. However, this is largely ignored in the professional community of medical doctors, psychiatrists, and family counselors in general. It's ignored as a matter of public policy, political policy, and the way we construct laws and punishment. It is the great hidden tragic secret of our society. And I know I was whipped repeatedly as a child in a ritual manner that we won't go into here. The worst experience of my life was sitting in my room as a 7th grader and listening to my mother mercilessly whip my 2 younger brothers for some minor infraction. And they each got whipped at least 50 times. And I can still hear their screaming today, 50 years later, 45 years later. And I have never heard anyone scream as horribly as I first heard my one brother scream begging for mercy, and then I heard my other brother scream begging for mercy. And I was powerless to help them. I was afraid and trapped in my room as a 7th grader, and thanking God that I did not have to face a similar punishment. Never in my life have I heard a human scream that horribly in the movies or in real life. The book is divided into 3 parts. The first part is called Breaking Down the Wall of Silence. And here the author talks about the cultural and the socio-political fact that this experience is totally ignored in our society. It's ignored by the medical profession as a cause of illness. It's ignored in making public policy, and it's ignored in the mental health profession as being linked to behavior 20 and 30 years later. In fact, the very existence of women whipping and hitting their children is largely discounted as not being real. Yet, it is a single statistical link to many problems that occur later in life. In the first part, she talks about different case histories, and she also talks about the story of Frederich Nietzsche, which I had never known before. And apparently he was whipped brutally as a child. And she makes the case that it was through his intellect that he preserved himself and escaped personal destruction. But he had a singular incident watching a horse getting whipped when he was an adult, that all this trauma and horror was brought back to him, and he could not withstand it, and he went insane. And he died 11 years later. Interesting story. I did not know that about Nietzsche. In the second part of the book, the author talks about facts and what is known, and statistical correlations between child abuse, getting hit as a child, getting abandoned, getting whipped, having basic physical and emotional trauma as a child. What the effects of this are on the health and psychology of the adult is pretty well established. And she talks about some of the research and some of the stories. Two stories that she brings to light here are the political influence of child abuse. Now, these are very dramatic, and perhaps rightfully so. But both Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin were profoundly whipped as children. And it is no secret, it is publicly known that their childhood would be characterized as repeated, brutal, physical whippings. Now, the author maintains it is no coincidence that they both went on to inspire the murder and death of millions of people, and to inspire political systems that thought the murder and death of millions of people was a good thing. And we today are on the brink of situations that seem remarkably similar. And I wonder how much child abuse and child trauma was involved in these situations years earlier. But the second part of the book is good, and it brings out some facts that establish or start to establish a linkage between child trauma and later social ills, medical ills, and problems in society as a whole, as large as World War and the death of millions of people in concentration camps. The third part of the book is called Giving Up the Hypocrisy, Facing the Painful Truth in Society and in Your Own Life. The liberating effect of facing this painful truth and starting an effort to move forward, to build a better life and to build a better society. That is the promise of this work and of this book. That is the hope that we all have, to live in a happy, loving, nurturing, supportive, healthy society. But until we confront the reality of the way people are brutalized and the way young minds are brutalized intentionally and inadvertently, we will never have the loving, kind, and nurturing society that we want to live in. Therefore, if you have an interest in this subject and these matters, and you should, I highly suggest reading Breaking Down the Wall of Silence by Alice Miller, and I highly suggest reading her other books, and I highly suggest taking a moment to think and reflect on this serious topic. Thank you, and leave your comments below.